Imagine you write a check for $400 million. Not to buy a building, not to acquire a company with factories and inventory and cash flow, to go racing, to put two cars on a grid of 20 in a sport where the difference between first place and 10th place is measured in fractions of a second, and where finishing last still costs you nearly as much as finishing first. Formula One is the most expensive sport in the world to compete in. It is also one of the most lucrative media properties on the planet. And the gap between those two facts is where team owners either build empires or lose fortunes. Most people who watch Formula One see the glamour. The Monaco street circuit, the podium champagne, the grid walks and the celebrity guests, and the $50,000 hospitality suites. What they do not see is the $500 million annual operating budget behind a competitive team. The aerodynamic arms race that consumes hundreds of millions a year, the political structure of the sport itself that determines who gets rich and who gets lapped. Here is the economics of owning a Formula One team. Let's start with entry. There are currently 10 teams on the Formula One grid. That number has been remarkably stable for years, and that stability is not an accident. It is the product of a system that makes entry extraordinarily expensive and extraordinarily difficult. The first cost of entering Formula One is the anti-dilution fee, a payment made to existing teams to compensate them for the dilution of prize money that a new entrant creates. When General Motors backed Andretti Global's bid to join the grid, the anti-dilution fee was set at $200 million. That is before a single car is designed, before a single engineer is hired, before a single wind tunnel hour is purchased, before a single race is entered. $200 million simply for the right to participate. Then comes the infrastructure. A competitive Formula One team requires a factory, not a warehouse, not an assembly plant, but a precision engineering facility capable of designing, manufacturing, and assembling some of the most technologically advanced machines ever built. Mercedes' Formula One factory in Brackley, England spans over 75,000 square meters. Red Bull's facility in Milton Keynes employs over 1,000 engineers and technical staff. Building or acquiring a facility of this caliber costs hundreds of millions of dollars before operations begin. Then, there is the wind tunnel. Aerodynamic development is the central arms race of Formula One. A competitive wind tunnel facility costs between $50 million and $150 million to build, and teams are now restricted by regulation in how many hours per year they can run it. Because without those restrictions, the wealthiest teams would simply buy aerodynamic superiority by running the tunnel continuously. Then there are the cars themselves. A Formula One car is not a product you buy. It is a product you design from near zero every single year. The regulations change, the competitive landscape shifts, and the car that won last season is largely irrelevant to the car you need this season. The cost of designing, building, and developing two race-ready Formula One cars for a single season runs between $150 million and $400 million, depending on whether your team builds its own power unit or purchases one from a manufacturer. And that figure is before you factor in the crashes. A single high-speed shunt can write off a chassis worth $12 million to $15 million in less than 2 seconds. This is the entry ticket to Formula One. Not the race weekend, not the travel, not the driver salaries, just the infrastructure and the car. 21. One of the most significant structural changes in the sport's modern history. The cap limits what teams can spend on car development and racing operations to $135 million per season as of recent regulations, with certain major costs excluded. Driver salaries are excluded. The top 3 drivers in Formula One, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and Charles Leclerc, each earn between $40 million and $65 million per year. That is outside the cap. Senior executive and top engineer salaries are excluded. Marketing costs are excluded. Power unit costs, the engine, are excluded. A customer power unit from Mercedes, Ferrari, or Honda costs approximately $15 million to $20 million per season per car. 2 cars, 2 power units, that is $30 million to $40 million before a single aerodynamic component is manufactured. Add the excluded costs to the capped costs, and a genuinely competitive midfield team is spending $350 million to $500 million per year in total. A top team, Red Bull, Mercedes, Ferrari, is spending closer to $500 million to $700 million when all exclusions are accounted for. The cost cap changed Formula One profoundly. Before 2021, the gap between the richest and poorest teams was existential. Mercedes spent over $400 million on car development alone in their dominant 2020 season. Smaller teams were spending $120 million total. The competition was not sport. It was a financial arms race with a predetermined winner. The cost cap compressed that gap, but it did not eliminate it. Because the exclusions are significant, and the teams that spend most aggressively on excluded categories still hold substantial advantages. Personnel is the clearest example. A team that pays its aerodynamicists, its simulation engineers, and its senior designers 30% more than a rival team can attract and retain talent that produces better cars. And that advantage compounds season after season. Here is the question that surprises most people. How does a Formula One team generate revenue? The answer has 4 primary sources, and they are not equally weighted. The first is the Constructors' Championship prize money, distributed by Formula One management from the sport's commercial revenues. Formula One generated $3.65 billion in total revenue in 2023. Approximately 50% of that, roughly $1.1 billion after deductions, is distributed to the 10 teams through a complex formula that rewards championship position, historical participation, and legacy bonuses. The top team, currently Red Bull, receives approximately $150 million to $180 million per year in prize fund distributions. The last-placed team receives approximately $80 million to $100 million. Here is the critical math. The last-placed team in Formula One receives $80 million to $100 million in prize money while spending $300 million to $400 million to compete. The prize money does not come close to covering the cost of racing. It is a contribution toward the deficit, not a path to profit on its own. The second revenue source is sponsorship. Team liveries in Formula One are rolling billboards reaching a global audience of 1.5 billion people across 24 race weekends. A title sponsorship on a competitive Formula One car costs between $50 million and $80 million per year. A secondary sponsor position, an engine cover, a rear wing end plate, a side pod, costs between $5 million and $30 million per year depending on position and team competitiveness. Ferrari's sponsorship portfolio generates an estimated $200 million per year. Mercedes' portfolio is comparable. Smaller teams struggle significantly because sponsors pay for visibility and association with success, and a team finishing 9th does not deliver the same commercial return as a team finishing 2nd. The third revenue source is manufacturer support. Teams backed by car manufacturers, Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin, Alpine, receive financial and technical support from parent companies for whom Formula One is a global marketing platform. Ferrari's Formula One operation is estimated to receive hundreds of millions in manufacturer contributions annually. Independent teams without manufacturer backing must replace that revenue entirely through sponsorship and prize money. A significantly harder commercial proposition. The fourth revenue source, and the fastest growing, is technology licensing and road car development transfer. The aerodynamic research conducted by Formula One teams has direct applications in road car development, aerospace, and defense. Red Bull Advanced Technologies. The commercial arm of Red Bull Racing licenses engineering expertise and designs to external clients across multiple industries. This revenue stream, while smaller than sponsorship, has significant growth potential as the technology gap between Formula One and road cars continues to narrow. Let's examine the prize money structure more carefully, because it is one of the most deliberately engineered financial systems in professional sport. Formula One's commercial rights are owned by Liberty Media, which acquired them from Bernie Ecclestone's CVC Capital Partners for $8 billion in 2017. Liberty Media generates revenue from race hosting fees, broadcast rights, sponsorship, and digital media. Race hosting fees alone are significant. A street circuit race like Monaco pays relatively little, approximately $15 million, due to its historic prestige and limited capacity to expand. A new market race like the Las Vegas Grand Prix paid a reported $55 million hosting fee for its inaugural 2023 edition. Saudi Arabia's Jeddah race carries a hosting fee estimated at $65 million per year. The prize fund distributed to teams comes with structural features that powerfully entrench the existing hierarchy. The Column 1 payment, distributed equally to all teams, rewards participation. The Column 2 payment, distributed based on constructors' championship finishing position, rewards performance. But then there are the legacy bonuses, sometimes called the long-standing team bonuses, paid to Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, and McLaren simply for their historical contribution to the sport. Ferrari receives an estimated $80 million per year in historical bonuses, regardless of where it finishes in the championship. This is $80 million that smaller teams do not receive. A permanent structural financial advantage baked into the commercial agreement that makes the sport's economics fundamentally unequal by design. To understand what it actually looks like to own a Formula One team without manufacturer backing and without legacy bonuses, look at Haas F1. Haas entered Formula One in 2016, the first American-owned team on the grid in decades. Founded by Gene Haas, the billionaire owner of Haas Automation, one of the largest machine tool manufacturers in North America. Haas structured the team unusually. Rather than building full in-house manufacturing capability, Haas sourced the maximum components legally permissible from Ferrari: suspension, gearbox, hydraulics, and focused its limited resources on the areas where they had to develop independently. The theory was sound: minimize the infrastructure cost. Leverage Ferrari's engineering excellence where permitted. Compete above your budget level. In 2018, it worked spectacularly. Haas finished 5th in the Constructors' Championship, ahead of teams spending significantly more money. Then the sport changed. The 2022 regulation reset, the most significant technical rules overhaul in decades, required teams to develop entirely new car concepts. Haas, with its limited engineering depth, struggled to find performance in the new regulations. The team has oscillated between midfield irrelevance and occasional flashes of competitiveness. Funded by a title sponsorship from Uralkali, then controversially dropped when its owner Dmitry Mazepin was sanctioned following Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The Haas story illustrates the central tension of independent team ownership in Formula One. You need a billionaire willing to absorb annual losses measured in the hundreds of millions, sustained by passion for the sport, the marketing value of the platform, or the belief that a commercial exit at elevated franchise valuations will eventually justify the investment. Because the prize money will not do it, and the sponsorship alone will not do it. Only the combination of all revenue streams, plus franchise value appreciation, makes the economics of independent team ownership even theoretically viable. Let's talk about what runs underneath the budget. Travel is the first hidden cost that surprises most observers. Formula One runs 24 races in 2024 across 5 continents. Every race weekend requires transporting not just 2 cars, but an entire technical operation, spare parts, pit equipment, hospitality infrastructure, data systems, and the engineering staff to operate them, to locations as varied as Bahrain, Japan, Singapore, Brazil, and Las Vegas. The logistics cost for a full Formula One season runs between $40 million and $80 million per team, and that cost is outside the regulated cap. Hospitality is the second hidden cost. Formula One's commercial model depends heavily on the paddock hospitality experience as a corporate entertainment and sponsorship activation tool. A top team's motorhome hospitality unit, the multi-story temporary structures visible in the European paddock, costs $15 million to $30 million to construct and must be transported, assembled, and dismantled at every European race. For flyaway races outside Europe, teams operate hospitality suites within the circuit's permanent structures. Personnel attrition is the third hidden cost, and arguably the most damaging. Formula One employs a relatively small global pool of genuinely elite aerodynamicists, performance engineers, and systems architects. When Red Bull wins 4 consecutive championships, every other team attempts to poach their personnel. Retention packages, garden leave clauses, and legal disputes over technical secrets consume legal budgets and management bandwidth that smaller teams cannot afford. And finally, there is the crash bill. Formula One cars are destroyed regularly. In a season with 24 race weekends plus testing and practice sessions, a competitive team might write off 4 to 8 chassis components at $12 million to $15 million each. That cost is inside the budget cap, which means every crash is not just a sporting setback. It is a budget allocation decision that affects development spending for the remainder of the season. So does owning a Formula One team actually work as a business? The honest answer is, it depends entirely on who is writing the check and what they expect in return. If you are a car manufacturer, Formula One is among the most cost-effective global marketing platforms in existence. Ferrari's brand value, estimated at $34 billion, is inseparable from its Formula One heritage. Mercedes sold more cars at higher margins to wealthier buyers during its dominant 2014 to 2021 period than at any point in the brand's modern history. The racing works. If you are an independent billionaire owner, the economics require a specific thesis. You are not buying a profitable business. You are buying a depreciating operational cost with an appreciating asset underneath it. Formula One team valuations have risen dramatically. When Lawrence Stroll acquired the Force India assets for $90 million in 2018 and rebranded them as Racing Point, later Aston Martin, the team's estimated value had risen to over $1 billion by 2023. When Doralton Capital acquired Williams Racing in 2020 for a reported $152 million, analysts estimated the franchise was worth between $500 million and $800 million by 2024. The franchise is appreciating. The operations are bleeding. The bet is that the appreciation eventually outpaces the bleeding. The global Formula One audience has grown from 400 million in 2017 to over 700 million in 2023, driven in significant part by the Netflix Drive to Survive documentary series that introduced the sport to an entirely new demographic. New race markets, Las Vegas, Miami, Qatar, are paying record hosting fees. Broadcast rights deals are escalating in every territory. Liberty Media's stewardship of the commercial rights has transformed Formula One from a European motorsport niche into a genuine global entertainment property. And in that transformation lies the bull case for team ownership. In the realistic bad scenario, you are a midfield team without manufacturer backing, without legacy bonuses, with a title sponsor who just pulled out and a car that cannot make Q3. Your prize money covers 25 cents of every dollar you spend. Your remaining sponsorship is performance dependent, and your performance is declining. Your best aerodynamicist just accepted an offer from Red Bull, and the cost cap, which was supposed to level the playing field, has been violated by a rival team whose penalty amounted to less than 1% of their competitive advantage. A Formula One car looks from the outside like the pinnacle of human engineering. From the inside, it is a $500 million annual argument between what physics demands and what your budget allows. The house always wins in Formula One. The house is not the team that finishes first. The house is Liberty Media, collecting hosting fees, broadcast rights, and sponsorship revenue from a sport whose participants spend more than they earn every single season and keep coming back anyway. The question is not whether you can afford to race. The question is whether you can afford to stop.